So speaking of electricity and magnetism, I believe that's part of how you think that they're formed. Could you talk a little bit about how they're made?
Well, I'm going to look at my book. It's really interesting because we have a program over here in England called Mastermind, and there's a black chair, and everybody dreads the black chair when they have to sit in it and face the question master. And there was a man called Magnus Magnusson who actually used to run it at times, and then he retired. He was an Icelander, and he wrote many, many books, and he was asked to be a guest. And the subject he chose was one of his books. Well, they fired various questions at him, and he could answer very few. And I said to myself, I don't think Magnus wrote that book.
Mm.
And it wasn't until I started writing, because I've now written 4 books, that I realized you cannot possibly remember everything you've written.
Yes.
Because you do such a huge amount of research. And so now I'm going to try and tell you what I possibly can about how they're formed. And so you'll have to hold on a minute, because I can't get this off absolutely pat. It was an extraordinary event, because I was giving a lecture in Hampshire at Alton College. And after the event, a woman took a taxi and happened to say to the taxi driver, she'd just been to a really fascinating talk on crop circles. The taxi driver said, "Oh, I saw one appear." Wait a second, have I got the right thing? I saw one appear at Stonehenge. Well, I then made inquiries. I didn't think there was one at Stonehenge in that particular year. And she came, I got in touch with her, and she said, "Oh, goodness me," she said, "no, that was ages ago." And I said, "Well, at that particular, when we were at that time," I said, "there'd been one in 1996, one in 97, one in 2001. And she said it was 1997. She immediately said that. Her son, who was in the army, she was going down to visit him. He had some leave. And as she drove down from Amesbury, which is just above the road above Stonehenge, you drive down the hill, you see Stonehenge, and actually it looks quite small in the distance. When you're flying, it's even more difficult to find it. Yet when you're in there, they're huge, great megaliths. Anyhow, she was fascinated by a cloud which was hovering over the field just opposite Stonehenge. And when she got further, closer to this, she saw there were a whole lot of cars pulled up against the fence opposite Stonehenge. And one just happened to nip out. And so she pulled in. And wait a second, let me just see. Yes, wait a second. So I questioned her about various things, and she told me that in some way, she said the most amazing thing was that she saw the crop going down in front of her eyes.
Yeah, wow.
And she said, that is wow. That really is wow, wow. But she couldn't see any shape because she was on the same level. And I said, well, was there any connection between the cloud and the crop circle? And
Right.
she did, yes. There was some extraordinary connection between the two, because as the crop going down in the field it seemed to be enlarging, so the cloud above was also enlarging and rotating and spinning, very, very similar to what was happening in the crop circle. So I said, well, how long was all this taking? And she said, she was Irish and very blunt. She said, when you're saying something like this happened, Lucy, you're not looking at your watch. So I felt rightly rebuked and said, no, I don't suppose so. And then, but I thought, well, I'll try again. So I said, well, can you just sort of think a little bit back? And she said, Lucy, I was there. I know what I saw. You weren't there. You don't know what I saw. But she said, I think about 20 to 25 minutes. So armed with that, I can't tell you how disappointed I was, because all the other reports I'd had and writing my first book, Crop Circle Enigma, I'd had many, many reports in the early 1900s, so this goes back a long time, of children experiencing seeing these things in the field. And often they were associated with bad times and the war. They were looked upon with quite a lot of superstition. And yes, wait a second, how long? I then, on the way back, I got in touch with Jim Lyons, with whom he's part of the co-author of this book.
Yes.
And I said to Jim, and he was far more interested in the cloud because he said that fits part of his hypothesis. Now wait a second. Now here we are. As a result of work conducted in the 1990s, it's possible to calculate the time a formation takes to appear based on the size and number of circles. The method relates to the Earth's gravitational and magnetic fields. This predicts a velocity of the resulting vortex filament of some 10 foot per second. Now that's very interesting. In the old days, we used to have teams of people going out into the field and measuring up. And I've got little booklets of that, I think going up until 1997. So up until then, we could work out exactly, using this method, how long all these formations took to appear. The filament propagates not unlike a solar flare, repeatedly looping through the Earth's surface, embroidering a gradually evolving pattern. To create the 151 in the 905.2 by 508 foot pattern would take the order of 20 to 25 minutes. You see, she was spot on. And she said the descending force emits an electrical discharge which releases bubbles from the underground aquifer, which rise up through the surface of the ground and patterns are formed. Wait a second. Yes. And so it would all fit in exactly with what was happening. There's less pressure inside than, yes, the descending force, yes, developed like embroidery. There's significantly less pressure inside than outside. Therefore, it's a sort of sucking down motion from the inside, which bends or sucks down the crop at the base. It was quite interesting because I challenged him on this. He also said, the mist, we were talking about the mist.
So this, just to be clear for the listener, this is your co-author's working model that he's proposing. This is James Lyons.
What you're talking about the time, well, we're talking about the time element, but also one's got to realize that this is an electric force. So it comes down and it penetrates the Earth's magnetic field, and then it creates this force. It creates the Earth energy, electrical lines all over the Earth. And as I was explaining, you get the crossover points, and which are called the nodal points. And it's as though there's some sort of magnetic attraction of this force. And we don't know exactly what this force is, except that it's electrical. And it's attracted to the nodal, the electrical energy in the nodal points. And you have all the underground aquifers which is all part of it. It's as above and so below. There's an awful lot we don't know, Derek. You know, we may sound as though we're getting to grips with it scientifically and all the rest, but it's quite beyond some of our modern science. And in fact, when I challenged Jim about, you know, this was his pattern, so to speak, his template, and he said, well, there are certain things that in the more complicated ones, certain things that happen on a sphere, and it's beyond our common understanding and understanding of science today. So we have to realize that, in fact, we know a lot, but we probably know less than we think we know.
Yes, I've experienced the same as a scientist. You read a lot, you learn a lot, and you think you've got it, and then you realize you're still beginning.
Absolutely. But you see, this is the exciting part. I think with the new science of today, people have a much more open mind. The old-time scientists who are being proved, some of them, you know, their patterns and their ideas were absolutely sound and solid, but quite a lot of them are being discredited now. And science is moving on. But in the old days, I'm working much more with scientists who have been retired, because when you're still working, you have to adapt to a certain scientific model, if you like. Mm-hmm. And you're frightened of losing your job prospect. You're frightened of being ridiculed by your peers. In fact, there's a model you do adhere to. Not that I'm descrying science in any way. It's absolutely essential to our progress. And I'm a huge admirer of science, but you've got to be open-minded and think outside the box.